evening.
Good evening.
Glad that you are here this evening. It's cold. It's apparently going to get a little bit icy. So be careful on the way home. But I'm glad you decided to come out and study with us this evening. Be turning to 1 Corinthians 13. That's our text, of course. We'll be at other places, but 1 Corinthians 13 is the basis of our study, which is what? Anybody remember?
Love.
A biblical definition of love. A study of love, not romantic love. The love that the church has. That's its immediate context. God's expectation of the church and how it should love. I had a friend named Jack. Jack was a mystery. Jack was angry all the time. You ever know anybody that's just angry? They're an angry person. Don't raise your hand. Don't point at anybody. But his anger grew on me. You know, kind of like an old truck. I used to have an old truck that overheated all the time. Just grows on you. Well, that's kind of the way Jack was. More of an aggravation, but, you know, you don't want to get rid of him either. And over coffee one afternoon, I asked him, "How are things going, Jack?" He would always say, "Oh, better than ever." Until he got angry. He just really struggled with anger. Well, push pause on Jack for a moment. Jack is not facing a new struggle. This has been around for a long, long time, right? Anger. What makes people angry?
Things don't go their way.
Things don't go their way. They get angry. What else? What makes them angry?
Circumstances without their control.
Circumstances where they are not in control. Makes them angry. Anybody else? What makes people angry?
Where they don't get their way.
You don't get your way. Maybe you get angry. Well, let's look at a few proverbs. Boy, there's a bunch of them. I've got 4, I think, picked out. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. You get insulted, you get angry? Quick temper? You know anybody with a quick temper? A person who had, oh, by the way, that was Proverbs 12:16. A person who has a quick temper does foolish things, and a person with crafty schemes is hated. A quick temper, you do something, you've never done anything foolish in your anger, have you? Never said anything you wish you hadn't said, done anything you wish you hadn't done. Oh boy, that's Proverbs 14:17. Proverbs 14:29. He who is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who is quick-tempered exalts folly. Notice how instead of anger it uses quick temper. What's the difference?
Anger just faster.
It's just a faster anger, okay? Let's see. Proverbs 22, beginning with verse 24. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. What do those tell us about anger? What's the main thing? It's not good. What else?
You lose control.
You lose control. It's almost like the anger is in control of you, instead of you in control of your emotions. Well, what was going on with Jack? I think part of Jack's challenge was honesty. Now, that may seem strange, but I think part of the deal with anger is honesty. And he wouldn't accept my assessment. I know that. Not at first, anyway. It would be very difficult for Jack to say something like, "Well, I don't feel compelled to ask others for their true feedback on my interactions because I trust my own intuitions about life more than what others think." See, it's about honesty. When you're angry, when you're quick to anger, it's more about you. Right? Everything's about you. And it's almost as if those that are able to control their anger have a little bit better feel for others. They're a little bit more others-centric. Well, the church at Corinth, that's the immediate context, right? 1 Corinthians 13, we're to the phrase which says, love is what?
Patient.
Patient, but it says it a different way. Love is not
Quick to
easily or quick to anger. Love is not easily angered or quick to anger. The church at Corinth apparently had some anger issues. Can you see that? If you think back to 1 Corinthians, can you see perhaps some anger issues in there? It's kind of strange a little bit, but they probably would be the last to acknowledge that they're angry. Angry person, you ask them, are you angry? No, I'm not angry. They'd be the last to acknowledge that their way of interacting with each other is not healthy. What do we call that in today's world? If you're interacting with somebody in an unhealthy way, what do they call that? Whatever name you want to make up. What else? Dysfunctional. You're dysfunctional. You're not functioning in the right way. You're functioning incorrectly. Well, they would be the first to say, no, we're healthy. We're doing okay. That's what angry people do, right? They ignore it. They deny it. Love and angry outburst, not meant to go together. Say that again. Love and angry outbursts, not meant to go together. Go ahead.
Are we approaching this from an anger standpoint or the reaction to anger? Otherwise, anger is a part of the human makeup.
You mean the quick part? Yeah. Yeah, anger's okay.
The quick part of the angry part.
God gets angry, right? And if God gets angry, it's an okay emotion. It's a good emotion.
So, but the term is slow.
Slow to anger. Not easily angered. Not quick to anger. Yes. So it's the reaction. You're right. Remember that little Jack-in-the-Box toy? Spin the thing and the music plays and all of a sudden, boom, there it goes, jumps up. That creepy music-filling machine makes you anxious. Kind of the way an angry person does, right? They make you anxious. You don't know when they're going to pop up out of their cubbyhole with that angry outburst. Now, don't raise your hand, but how many of you have or know an angry Jack? An angry Jack in the Box. Yeah, I think we all probably do. And what does a person with a short fuse do? They pop off. What else?
try to suck you into their.
Try to suck you into their anger, their dysfunction. What else? Usually they make a fool of themselves. That was one of the key themes in Proverbs as well. So I want to emphasize this evening the truth that the love condition of not being easily angered doesn't just apply to non-Christians or people outside the church. Because who is the church, or who is the letter to the Corinthians written to? The church. Does the church have a problem with anger?
You got people, they have problems.
If you got people, you have problems. The church itself can act like that Jack in the Box. You ever thought of that?
Oh, yeah, I've seen
Yeah. We've all seen it. I want you to think, how far can you go back in your mind where the church is acting like, or God's people is acting like a Jack in the Box?
it.
Oh, you mean modern times? I'm going back like biblical times. From Acts 2, how long until the first angry outburst?
Immediately had to do with the feeding of the widows.
The feeding of the widows, perhaps.
Because they had an outburst there, and that's when deacons were.
Okay.
Well,
There's some upset about circumcision, long in there somewhere. But it doesn't specifically say they were angry. It did say they complained. Can you think of the first time they're angry? It's right there. It's just right after that. Acts chapter 7. Stephen. Remember him?
you talk about the Pharisees.
The Pharisees, yeah. They will claim to be God's people. Acts chapter 7, it's unsettling and inspiring all at the same time. You have the members of the Sanhedrin, and they are reacting to Stephen's preaching, and what do?
They gnashed their teeth and tore their clothes.
Gnash their teeth, tear their clothes, twisting that little jack in the box until they burst up. You see it then, you see it throughout Scripture, you see it through history, you see it today. You ever driven down the road? You encounter road rage? Anybody ever get mad at you? Flip you off? Curse at you? Try to run you off the road? Whatever? You see it in homes? How bad is domestic violence in our culture? It's very bad. In fact, let me give you some statistics. The research on domestic violence, and it's often ignored by the church, by the way. Ignored by Christians. We just, I guess, don't believe it's a big problem even in the church. But if you will go back, I'm not going to name any names, but if you go back through our own fairly modern history, even in churches of Christ, and look at some of the divorces from some of our extremely conservative preachers, you know what the wives will tell you? Abuse. That mindset, you better obey me. If you don't, you're going to pay the price. Christianity Today reported on domestic violence in churches under the title The Silent Epidemic. Domestic violence, highlighted in the Christianity Today report, spoke of multiple studies. Globally, women between the ages of 15 and 44 are more likely to be maimed or die as the result of male violence than through cancer, malaria, or war combined. That's, of course, throughout the world. On average, there have been 35 assaults before a victim of domestic abuse calls the police. That's on average. 35% of women around the globe have experienced sexual or physical abuse by a partner or a non-partner. That's almost 1/3. It's over 1/3. Another painful but important statistic embedded in this research is worldwide, men who are exposed to domestic violence as children are 3 to 4 times more likely to perpetuate violence as an adult than men who do not experience domestic violence. Why is that?
Follow a pattern.
They follow a pattern. In the psychological world, it's called their normal. That's all they know. That's their normal. Anything else is abnormal. Well, what's happening? Is it possible that our society is perpetrating violence and the church has become an accomplice? Because we're quiet. We don't talk about it. Easily angered Christians. It's hard to reverse that. It's almost impossible. Not just road rage, not just, for example, race-related tension. We are angry and we become violent. Christians often use the phrase, well, that offends me. That is offensive. And we use those phrases to justify an angry response. It's a way of blaming somebody else because we are easily provoked to anger. It's an excuse. What is this definition, this condition of God's definition of love? Love is not what? Easily angered. Don't answer out loud. Are you easily angered? I almost got mad at myself the other day. I was trying to put my brush in my basket where I keep my hairbrush, and it kept falling out. And I was about to throw it across the room.
Feels good.
But how silly, how foolish, how easily angered. I mean, don't get me on a
That
soapbox.
was flusteration.
That's flusteration. That's a good word for it.
I lost a lot of tools that way.
Yes. I used to play golf with my good buddy. Man, he threw golf clubs. He'd get mad and toss those clubs up. I got to where I was covering my head all the time. We humans are experts at casting ourselves as the victim. And we rewrite the story that puts us at the center of the injustice, when actually all we are is easily angered. We repaint our anger. We repaint our hatred of someone or some situation that is threatening to us, and we make it into a righteous anger. Does that make it right? Love is not easily angered. I searched the scriptures. Remarkably, nowhere in Jesus' teaching is there an allowance for, okay, well, if somebody's a jerk, then yeah, I can get offended. It's not there. In fact, what does it say? The exact opposite.
Turn your cheek.
If somebody strikes you on one cheek, what do?
I'm going to knock the heck out of it.
Well, at least you're honest.
I'm sorry.
We are flat out told to forgive. Even, especially, the stuff that offends us. That's the whole point. The thing that you think makes your anger righteous is the very thing you are called to forgive. What's grace all about? Explain to me the concept of grace.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness for what?
What we don't deserve.
For those that offend you. For things you don't deserve. Because you have offended. Grace is not for the deserving. Forgiveness is not for the deserving. Forgiving means what? Give me a definition.
Forgiving and forgetting.
Forgiving and forgetting. I'm going to preach on that sometime because forgetting is basically an impossibility, but you still got to forgive. Go ahead.
Uh,
Oh,
When you forgive someone, you don't hold it against them.
you don't hold it against them. Forgiving means surrendering your claim to resentment. I'm not going to resent you. Oh man, that's hard.
There has to be a limit there somewhere. I mean, seriously, they do. Like the boy named Sue,
Yeah.
the song Johnny
Yeah.
Cash song. There's got to be a limit.
Well, think of it this way. If there's a limit, will I make it to heaven?
Well, even Peter cut off an ear.
Even Peter cut off an ear. That's right. It's hard. There's nothing easy about God's definition of love. It is incredibly difficult, near impossible, without His help.
That is forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Without His forgiveness. And we offend Him constantly.
Yeah, but when we can justify somebody else's anger, that doesn't give us a license to do it.
That's right.
Don't blame that at the same time.
So let me ask you a few questions before we move on from this phrase. Have you ever regretted something you did in anger? Oh, absolutely. Why do we not think somebody else does or doesn't? We don't forgive them because they don't deserve it. Well, what if they regret it too?
You're always concerned about that they don't regret.
Mm-hmm. We give ourselves tons of grace and them none, or very small amounts.
They didn't even know you offended them.
That's right, sometimes.
I don't think you forgive somebody because of who they are. You do it because of who you are.
Yes. One of the first things you learn in divorce care, you know, this is hard because they've betrayed you. That's why you're in divorce care. Forgiveness is not about them at all. It's not about the other party. Forgiveness is all about you. It puts you out of prison. If you can't forgive, you're just holding yourself in prison. They're not in prison. You think they're in prison. They're not. You are. And why is it so easy to let all your anger out on Facebook?
Because you don't have to face them and everybody else say, oh, I'll pray for you. And
It's impersonal.
Yeah. Just,
And yet the whole world sees it.
they'll all agree with
They
it.
all see it. What an idiot you are.
And you take consensus of how many is on your side.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess you can. Because there's going to be a few that
If
side
on your
with you.
side, that's righteous.
Love is not easily... Let me flip over there. 1 Corinthians 13. You got it? Somebody start reading at verse 1 until you get to that phrase. You want me to do it? Because I'm there now.
If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs.
Okay. The ESV, I just noticed, says it is not irritable. That changes it, doesn't it? The anger is not easily angered. It is not irritable.
Be a stretch on that.
Yeah.
This is NIV.
It brings out a different...
Irritable can eventually be provoked to anger, but that, to me, that's sort of the beginning of it, so. It's always irritable is sort of the problem with humanity.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Irritable is soft soaping.
Yes.
But for it to be a reality, then the anger then has to play a part in that.
Okay. Finish this statement. Grace isn't for the righteous. What else? Worthy. Or the deserving. It isn't for those who deserve it. Next phrase. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Leviticus 19, beginning with verse 18, says, "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people. Love your neighbor as yourself." Did you realize that was the basis of the original command? Don't hold a grudge. Love your neighbor as yourself. I've known several preachers that have said there are members of my congregation that have a file folder and they keep record every time I mess up.
How thick is that file?
It's as thick as the record holder wants it to be. God gave you a memory. It's a great thing, isn't it? He expects you to use it well. You can't control everything that goes in. And sometimes you hear and see things that you wish you never heard and never saw, and they go in, but there it is. And you have to know what to do with it, how to use your memory. Think of your memory like a car. You can't do anything about the memories in the car, but you know some of them don't belong in the driver's seat. They will fight to get there. They will fight for control, to drive. You have to put them in the back seat. Is that easy? No. If you ask me how to forgive someone, that's the answer I'm going to come up with. Because, as we just said, forgive and forget. To forget is pretty much impossible. But you have to learn how to master memory. Put some memories in the back seat. They don't need to drive.
When God extends grace to us, though, He chooses to forget our offense.
He does. But we can't.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing. He's chosen to forget it.
Yes.
He brings it up.
Right. He can do that. I wish I could.
The human brain, more times we replay an incident in our head, the more ingrained.
Yes.
The stronger that synapse becomes, and that memory stays with us a lot longer.
That's right.
Because it goes back to the not easily angered. If we're not easily angered, and somebody angers us, and we don't keep replaying it in our head, we're not going to remember it forever.
Right. Memory and forgiveness do go together. But it's important to clarify how. What does it mean when it says love keeps no record of wrongs?
Don't keep bringing up a hurt every time.
Don't keep bringing it up every time.
Somebody's face or.
It may pop into your head. It doesn't have to pop out of your mouth. If you don't forget, you haven't forgiven. I've heard people say that. I've heard preachers yell it from the pulpit. If you don't forget, you haven't forgiven. I've searched the scriptures cover to cover. Never found once forgetting as a requirement for forgiving.
If it is, none of us would be saved, period, because if that's gonna be the damnation of the human soul, because I don't care if you have a normal mind, things don't just disappear. Now, sometimes where the problem is we start searching for it in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and sometimes something comes along, all of a sudden you have a recall of something that you didn't want to deal with or didn't want to remember. But it's always there. So yeah, that's a complicated thing.
It's a complicated thing. Think of it this way. If you could forget, what is there to forgive? One without the other doesn't exist. If you could forget it, there'd be nothing to forgive. That's what makes it so powerful with God. He can forget it, so it's gone. There's nothing left to forgive. Forgiveness is the act of offering restoration. It's the act of offering a relationship where you absolutely remember the sin that caused the wound in the first place, but you have forgiven and you want to restore it. That's the act of forgiveness. Now, again, just like in divorce care, that doesn't mean the relationship has to be exactly as it was. But the relationship is restored. It may be different, but it's restored. It's a kind of forgiveness that is illustrated in the Old Testament book of Hosea. Beautiful story. One of my favorites. Love Hosea. Hosea represents God in the story. And he's called to forgive his wife. Remember her name? Gomer. Probably not pronounced Gomer, but because I think of Gomer Pyle. She commits adultery. And Hosea is required by God to forgive her. And it's the whole point of the story. But a brief linguistic reference probably is in order. This condition of love, here in 1 Corinthians 13, takes a decided turn toward the difficult when you get to this, love keeps no record of wrong. If you were to take that literally, what would it be? Love forgets, but you can't. So, looked up the word. Here it is in some other passages. And they are in the same context. Love must be sincere. Hate what is
Evil.
That's the word. It keeps no evil. That's the word. Love keeps no record of evil. It is sincere, but it hates what is wrong. To use the 1 Corinthians 13 word. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Romans 12:9 and 10. Romans 13, the next chapter. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no, that's the word, wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. It keeps no record of wrong. It does no wrong. That's the fulfilling of the law. Love doesn't do evil to someone else, even if they do evil to you. Love does not do wrong to someone else, even if they do wrong to you.
really interpret this correctly, love can't do wrong.
It can't do wrong. Matthew 5. You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't fight back against someone who wants to do harm to you. If they hit you on the right cheek, let them hit the other cheek too. If anyone wants to sue you in court and take your shirt, let them have your coat too. If a soldier forces you to walk with him 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to anyone who asks you for something. Don't refuse to give to anyone who wants to borrow from you. You've heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who treat you badly. If you do this, you will be children who are truly like your Father in heaven. He lets the sun rise for all people, whether they are good or bad. He sends rain to those who do right and to those who do, and that's the word in 1 Corinthians 13, wrong. So he's asking you to act like him. God does not treat them wrongly. So don't keep a record of wrongs. In other words, don't treat someone else wrongly. And no passage makes clearer the connection between divine love and responding to the evil that people do than the one where Jesus is hanging on the cross. What does Jesus have to do for us to embrace the Jesus Creed teaching? He has to die. And on the cross, he shows us what it looks like. In that stressful situation, he did not revert back to revenge or reaction. He still loves. Remember 7 sayings? And of those 7 sayings, one of them is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do.
You know, sort of strange too, because the participants or the watchers that were there, a lot of the Jewish Pharisees, that were watching it, they said, come down and revenge. They were, you are who you say you are.
Mm-hmm.
Come down
And seek revenge, yeah.
So their thought is always, well, we're doing something wrong, we want to see you revenge of it.
He could have ended it. He said
He could. But instead, he chose to model, and it's the most crucial model that we have of what love looks like. It does not keep a record of wrongs. Father, they don't know what they're doing. I forgive them. You forgive them.
As far as the crucifixion, there was 2 there with him, and thousands before the crucifixion of death. You look at this, you try to tell people, well, there was other people crucified, But then you say, the other people didn't have every sin that's ever committed and going to be committed on his shoulders.
That's right. Jesus bore that incredible weight. For Jesus, forgiveness wasn't something he did once in a while. It's who he was. That was his lifestyle, his attitude. And it calls us to an intelligent and disciplined approach of not keeping a record of wrongs. When you recall a wrong, in that moment you have to decide which way are you going to go. Are you going to nudge the trajectory toward the long arc of forgiveness and love, and that's the long, hard way around, or are you going to take the quick way and get angry and seek revenge? And by doing so, you're just opening that same old wound again, over and over and over. Now, if you choose the path of forgiveness, you find yourself better armed next time. If you choose the shorter, quicker, easier way, you're reinforcing resentment and rage and anger. Then keep in mind in the prayer where Jesus is teaching his disciples to pray, Matthew 6, if, biggest word in Scripture, if you forgive other people when they sin against you, what happens?
God will forgive you.
Your Heavenly Father will forgive you. If you forgive others. Matthew 7, the next chapter. Do not judge, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, that's the way God is going to judge you. The same measure that you use. So the way I forgive others is the way God is going to forgive me. The way I judge others, that's the way He's going to judge me. Then, to add on to this huge burden, Jesus tells one of His most famous parables. Peter asked, how often are we to forgive? And what was Jesus' answer? 7 times 7 or 7 times 70, depending on how you look at it. But either way, it's a whole bunch. But that's not the really hard part. The really hard part, that parable sets up another parable, or that answer sets up the parable. And the parable is, there's a person who owes more than the national debt and is forgiven. And then he turns around and chokes the life out of the fellow servant who is only 3 months behind on his rent. So the master, the original master, hears about this and he reinstates the full burden of the first forgiveness, the first servant. What's he saying?
Same judgment you use, you get.
That's right. The book of James, Jesus' brother, has a very blunt message. When we judge each other in slanderous ways, you're actually judging God Himself. When you go to judging each other, you're actually judging God Himself and His law. Before Jesus gives the golden rule, which is what? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He commands us not to judge each other. So, question. Why do we keep record of wrongs? With all of that heaped on us, why do we do it?
Can't help ourselves.
We're selfish.
We're selfish. We can't help ourselves.
We're human.
We're human. It just feels good.
A lot of you spend a lot of time showing the things that's impossible for us to not do or to do. Now, what's the answer?
Depend on Him and His grace and act as much like Him as possible. That's my answer. Your thoughts. Love is not easily angered, and love does not keep a record of wrongs.
Some of that requires constant practice.
It requires constant practice. Do you agree with me we have watered down the definition of love? We have made it so easy, a buffet. God's definition is nowhere near what we think of love.
But if we water it down so much, then we don't need forgiveness.
That's right. We're not guilty if we water it down.
But if we look at it the way God looks at it, we're all condemned then we understand the importance of the blood.
And we understand there is no one good. No, not one. Wow, it's tough. If we could love each other like we love our favorite food, I could eat chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream right now. Go stand outside and eat it.
What's wrong with that? As long as it's chocolate.
But if you want me to help you change your flat tire out in the parking lot right now, I've got a backache, a headache, I don't know how, all kinds of things. What's the difference?
One of them's chocolate.
One of them has never harmed me. Well, actually, I say that it's probably harming me in great ways I don't know anything about.
I think you said early on, that's selfish.
It is, yes. It is all. It is self-centered. Yes. But I'm going to Dairy Queen nonetheless. No, I'm just kidding. Not tonight. Not unless Karina makes me.
She will.
She loves
She loves me.
I don't want to be selfish, you know?
Time is up. Thank you for coming to class. We continue on next week. Can you reach over? I think it's off anyway. I think the battery ran out. Just in case. Let's keep a few in our prayers. I want to keep the family of Charlie in our prayers and Charlie himself. What a great parade